Hi guys, this is my last attempt at making this video because the first attempt I accidentally deleted and the second attempt went out of sync. So if I don't manage to do it on this attempt, then I'm going to give up. But I would like to try to simply because I had a request to do a video on derealisation. I've already done one on depersonalisation. And very much like the depersonalisation video, this one's not going to be particularly helpful to anybody because it's something that I still suffer from. So it's more really to give my feelings on the subject more than anything. So, okay, here we go. Third attempt. Right, depersonalisation and derealisation are different but share similarities. Depersonalisation happens when you dissociate with yourself, and derealisation happens when you dissociate with your environment and what's going on around you. Excuse me if I look a bit scruffy. It's evening time, the lighting's bad, and I've stopped caring, to be honest. Okay, so I've had problems with derealisation for a long time. I think it's actually probably at the core of my social anxiety. It wasn't until I started doing these videos on derealisation that I realised what a contributing factor it was with social anxiety. So I'm a little bit out of breath from coming upstairs, so bear with me. Okay, so I would say that firstly, let me explain what derealisation feels like. It's a feeling of detachment from the world, I would say, and it's a feeling of unreality, and everything becomes quite surreal feeling. So for me, it tends to feel like I'm viewing myself in third person, like I'm not actually inside my body. I'm just floating through my environment, and I do not really I don't really connect with it at all. So this is something that happens most frequently when I attempt to challenge my social anxiety. So what happens is I would go out with the best of intentions, and it's usually to somewhere where I'm trying to gain some exposure therapy by being in situations that make me feel uncomfortable. So for me, that's usually going out when there's a group of people that are going out together, and it can happen when I'm around people that I don't know, sat at a table or something. It can also happen when I go to places that are unfamiliar to me, and it gives me an awful sense of lack of control. So at this point, I find myself starting to dissociate. I already have problems with depersonalisation, which is, I would say, is a lack of connection with who you are. So I'm already in a situation when I go out where I don't really feel like I have an identity. And then when I get into a situation where something out of my control happens, like for example, somebody turns up at an event and joins us when I wasn't expecting it, that's when derealisation kicks in. And usually that feels like it begins with a feeling that I don't belong, and that I feel almost like an alien in my environment, like I'm imitating being a human being. And everything goes on to manual, so I become very aware of my body language or lack of body language. I become very aware of the things that are going on around me, but although I'm aware of what's going on around me, I don't seem to be able to process it. So that's quite difficult because it turns the world into a bunch of moving images that I cannot relate to. And usually that's sort of provoked, I would say, by things like too many people talking, too much noise, anything really which tends to overwhelm me, which is most things social. So once I go into the stage, sorry, my voice is a bit wobbly for some reason. Once I go through the stage of dissociating with my environment, I become very insular because it makes me feel like I cannot function properly. And it makes me feel like it makes me feel extremely incompetent and insecure. So one of the worst traits I have found of derealisation is when I start to dissociate with people, because I can be in a situation where people are talking to me, and although I can see their lips moving and I can hear words coming out of their mouth, I'm unable to process what they're saying, so I don't know how to react. And I find it very difficult to respond to people naturally, because I turn almost into a robot. It's a horrible feeling, and leading up to the point where I completely dissociate, I tend to feel like I'm invisible, like everything's happening around me, and I'm only a spectator. So it makes me feel like I'm like an extra in a movie. How do I explain it? You know, when you read a book and there's something on your mind and you read and read the same paragraph, but it doesn't mean anything because you're literally reading the words but not making sense of the sentences. That's what it feels like. Sorry, my cat's doing something weird. I think it's got inside my wardrobe. Anyway, at the point that I start to dissociate with people, that's where derealisation tends to turn into a panic attack, and I feel like I don't belong. I feel like I'm incompetent. I feel like I don't understand the things that are happening around me. I don't have the ability to properly process information, and it gets very overwhelming, and I just literally don't know what to do. And I think usually what happens in that situation is everything completely shuts down. So I go into silent mode and I lose the ability to communicate, and I go more and more into myself to the point that I have to make a decision when I get that overwhelmed that I've got to either stay around and potentially have a huge panic attack that will result in an emotional outpour and tears, or I need to run away. And usually I run away. Most of the time I say goodbye to people, but sometimes that's not possible. I just need to run away. So I might say goodbye to the person that I went there with and just make a swift exit. So it's a very stressful thing to experience. I think I experienced it at its most extreme when I was going through bereavement, through losing my mum. Once she passed away, I felt like the world became surreal, and I started to have problems with associating with what was going on around me. And I think that's at the same point that I actually experienced the worst of my depersonalization, because I felt as if I completely lost my identity in the process. And sort of about 8 years later, when I started to come around, I didn't know who I was anymore. So I'm still struggling to recover myself, to find out who I am, or to better identify with who I am. But the derealisation is something that's harder to work on because it's environmental. So I'm starting to think now that maybe the only way that I can overcome derealisation is through exposure therapy, which is why I'm starting to consider whether I need to take the challenge of attempting to overcome my social anxiety. Now that I've been able to identify that my social anxiety is usually perpetuated by derealisation, that gives me some kind of a head start when it comes to trying to recover from it. So I would be open to any suggestions that anybody can give me on how to overcome derealisation. I can handle depersonalisation because I've had that all of my life, and I've always struggled to understand who I am, and I've struggled to identify with my identity. So I'm not so bothered by that one. I think I can work on that one in my own time. But derealisation is something that is an issue for me. So I do thank the person who made the suggestion to make the video on derealisation. I'm sorry that I'm unable to give you any tips on how to overcome it, because I'm actually experiencing it myself every time I attempt to do anything which provokes my social anxiety. So yeah, if you've got any suggestions, I'm willing to give them a go. I do feel for anybody who's experiencing derealisation for the first time, I don't really consider it to be a disorder for myself, simply because it's been there throughout the whole of my life, and I think up until a certain point, I think I believed that it was something that everybody experienced because I didn't know any other way. So I sort of always assumed it was a character trait, but I think probably in the last 12 years of being single, because I've got difficulties with socialising since losing my mum and developing health anxiety, that I'm starting to think that, I don't know, yes, there's possibility that the element of derealisation could actually be some form of a disorder, an emotional problem, and I don't know how to overcome that problem. So I shall try my best to experiment to see if I can find anything that will help me, in the hope that it might help you as well. But in the meantime, if you have anything that you can suggest for me, or for anybody else that might be viewing these videos, I'm sure we would all appreciate it greatly. Okay, so I'm going to keep it short on this one, just simply because I haven't got the energy to keep talking when I've already done this video twice before. So I'm going to leave it there, and I shall speak to you guys next time. Okay, bye.